Hello, everybody. It is the me, Game Penguin 21, and today I have a special guest uh, talking about an interesting
Y-
article that I found while browsing the internet. And that special guest
Yep,
is.
and that would be me. My name is Sandy. You probably already know me from a handful of videos on Game Penguin's channel, and he's also appeared on my channel as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think this is an article that was probably recommended to me like a
Yeah.
while ago. Like I vaguely remember this title. I feel like
Yes.
someone
Yes,
probably
yes,
sent
yes.
this to me. I wanted to take a look at it, and then it just completely left my fucking mind.
Yeah, so
But
you might not be able to see it, but we are kind of doing this live, so this is going to be a little bit different, hence why the microphone quality might be a little odd. But I did manage to get it to where I can use the Samson microphone, which is my favorite. Uh, so this is an article by The Gamer. Now, The Gamer is one of those is like a Kotaku, but like not. Just a different flavor of Kotaku in some ways. But they're a gaming journalist that's essentially trying to convince us that it's time to start trusting video game reviewers
in
again,
fact, that is
apparently.
literally the title of it,
That's
and
pretty much the title, yeah.
I find it very interesting that they're using. I'm assuming Shadow of the Erdtree is
Yeah,
probably
you
going to
can
be
you
brought
can
up
tell
here,
because of the tree.
judging by the
It's a beautiful
thumbnail that we're
it's a
getting of this
beautiful
article.
screenshot though. Like look at that. It's a beautiful sight scene.
Yeah. Get into the fucking article. I could probably go on about like Elden Ring lore for time immemorial,
Yeah, yeah.
but we
Continuing
need to
on.
get into this article.
So yeah.
So it's titled "It's Time to Start Trusting Video Game Reviewers"
Mm-hmm.
by a Mr. Benjamin Sledge. What a
It's a great
fucking
name.
name!
Great
Can
name.
I just say,
It's a great name.
why does this man have the hardest fucking name, but he creates like the most flaccid fucking article
Okay, yeah, okay,
title?
okay. So scrolling on down here. Do you want to
Yeah,
start
let's
reading or do you
see
want me to?
here. I guess I will start it off here.
Sure, sure.
So let's see here. I get it. Games journalists are terrible at video games. Remember that one guy playing Cuphead? Let's ignore the fact that games journalists regularly beat entire games in a far shorter time span than regular people who don't have deadlines to meet. Turn a blind eye to the fact that they don't have a single guide to help them beat a difficult boss or access an area with some obtruse entry method, like drinking poison that kills you at any other time. Forget the fact that they beat them before the patches arrived to make the game easier. Jesus fucking Christ, dude. First of all, who the fuck actually gives a shit? But also, like, that's not the problem, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we get it. You have deadlines and shit like that.
Absolutely.
But, like, the biggest problem when it comes to game journalists, especially, like, the more well known ones, and not for good reasons, the more well known ones that are not very
Mm-hmm.
well known for good reasons, they usually, like, complain about shit that just doesn't make any fucking sense,
Mm-hmm.
or they like complain about shit that's already like a long-standing and beloved part of like a game franchise or something like
Right.
that, or they like pull an Alyssa Mercant and they for some reason decide to like compare it to the real life world that they experience for whatever godforsaken reason, like that, like we don't give a shit that you complete it, like, you know, in a short amount of time, or that you don't have like, you know, wiki guides that haven't been set up yet, or like whatever in God's good name you're trying to fucking state here. The big problem is that like games journalists nowadays are such a massive fucking joke, partially due to just like the people that complain about nonsense.
Yeah. I 100% agree. By the way, I just kind of had to look this up because I don't remember specifically. That Cuphead example, by the way, is about 6 years old, right? Just as like a timeline of events. The one guy who played Cuphead, who was a games journalist, who failed at the tutorial, calling this game awful. He's done another one where he did Doom as well. But that's about 6 years old now in terms of just time
Jesus
frame.
Christ.
The one big problem that I have with most video games journalists, the only one that I can say for like that's a good games journalist, because there are a couple of them, is like Yahtzee Croshaw, because he's amazing in what he does because he reviews like a game every week, and like he does it in the best way that I know possible. Like, yeah, he's sarcastic. Yeah, he makes like weird jokes and stuff, but he's very apolitical in his stances. And that's what I think you need to
Yeah.
be when you're doing any sort of journalism. Be as apolitical as possible. And that's the problem with most of the game journalists nowadays.
The thing that I usually take notice of whenever it comes to like games journalists is that seem to bitch about shit that just doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway,
And that's the problem that I have. They just bitch about shit that just doesn't matter or is shit that people enjoy about the games.
yeah.
They also hate video games and choose to cover this beat because they want to destroy the entire industry. It doesn't matter that wages are low across the sector and crunch is rife, especially when reviewing 100-hour games with bafflingly tight turnarounds. We hate video games and can't wait to tear them down.
It
I,
doesn't. I don't think that that's correct. I think that that's one of those things where they do like video games, but I've come to realize as soon as I started making content creation, because the job that I have is a lot of content creation. As soon as I realized like how much work goes into the content creation that I'm supposed to make for my job, I'm like, I don't want to do any of this.
Yeah. Like like again, this is something that I brought up I think in like a previous video of mine about that guy that was bitching about the fact that women have positions within like the gaming industry and whatnot.
Hmm.
And he had that like same sentiment of like, oh, these journalists and these game developers, they just fucking hate video games
Mm-hmm.
and they hate gamers and shit like that. And I brought up that like just from any kind of standpoint that just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah. I mean, again,
Like it
to
just
bring
comes
up a
across to me as just like a blanket statement just so we can try and rile up as many idiots as humanly possible. Like I don't think they hate video games. I just think that half the time they just don't fucking understand what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think that in essence, to kind of go off what you were saying, women have been in video games since the beginning. Don't believe me? There was literally the people who invented coding was a woman in the military. And there was, I believe, like a CEO or a CFO, I mentioned this before, of someone that worked at Atari in terms of video games. So those are at least two examples that I can think of. But they've been involved in video games for a long, long time.
And I guess to somewhat rile up the anti woke crowd a
Yeah.
little bit here, but if I remember correctly, I think the guy I might be somewhat mistaken on this one, but I believe the guy that pretty much like kind of put the final nail in the coffin when it comes to like World War II and like, computing and not really like a gay dude.
Nice. Very nice.
Anyways, the
I'll re-
myth that
I want to read it. I want this is
all
why
right, all right,
I
all right,
want to
all right,
read
all
some
right.
stuff.
You can read it. Go ahead.
All right. The myth that games journalists not only suck at video games but also actively hate the medium is one that I've never understood. However, the issue with
Oh,
game reviews is much easier to phrase, what? To parse.
to parse.
Thank you. Gaming in 2024 is team based. You're on Team Xbox or Team PlayStation, Team Fortnite or Team COD, Team Stellar Blade or Team Censorship, Team Developer or Team Journalist. That's how many gamers see it at least. That's just life in general right now. Is everyone's like
Yeah,
there's an
I
in
can
group
kind of
and an out group. This is
Yeah,
breaking it
and I
down
can kind of
into
understand the irritation behind that. Again, this is something that I believe I brought up within the women ruin video games video, but this
mm,
is like something that I can at least understand the exhaustion of. Like I think this was literally brought up in that one screenshot, like the game developer that had the really, it had a terrible title. It was a Reddit post, funnily enough, but it was a Reddit post with like a pretty out there title where it was like titled something like, I'm a games developer and I'm starting to hate gamers. But when you actually began
mm,
to read into it, it was literally just a guy venting his frustrations about the gatekeepy assholes within the gaming community. And I'm like,
yeah.
I can kind of understand this guy,
Yeah, I
obviously.
so just
And I hate those people too.
yeah,
I've gone after those kinds of idiots. I fucking hate gatekeepy assholes that say, "Oh, you're not a true fan if you do this," or you can't enjoy video games if you do X, Y, and Z, or you're not a true gamer if you don't play on this specific platform. Like I fucking hate those people. Play
yeah.
whatever you want. Play however the fuck you want. Play on whatever system you want. Just don't be an asshole, okay?
Yeah.
That's my mo.
One of, if not the biggest things here is I mentioned this in a video that is, oh my god, at least 5 years old now. But I broke it down as there was, because I took social psychology in school and psychology, because I can do marketing. And the thing is that when you're talking about groups of people like communities and stuff. There are such things as in groups and out groups. The in groups are the
Yeah,
people that you associate the most with and the people that are like your friends, your benefactors, your etc, whatever the fuck. The end all be all of it is that the out groups are kind of ousted in that way. And I forgot how I explained it in the original context of this, but when you have those kinds of groups and that they get very hostile, I think that video aged great, by the way. But when they get hostile towards each other, that kind of rifes the discourse a bit. And it's an interesting thought experiment of like, what would happen, right, if you took one person from each of the groups and like the extreme strawmans that people use, put them into a room, what would happen in that context? That just sounds like a really interesting experiment to do, right?
It sounds like a game of the Isle waiting to happen. But
Yeah. Anyway,
all right.
there's a
Anyways,
major problem with games marketing that fuels the fundamental misery. Hype trailers for games years away from release whip fans into a fervor, and the excitement heightens to a level where any criticism of the game is seen as a personal slight. Calling Still Ablaze protagonist Eves boring meant you're a part of the pro censorship. What?
Wokarati who can't stand a
Wokarati.
beautiful
Okay.
woman leading a game.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
kind of find, yeah, I guess I can kind of see the annoyance
Mhm.
from that kind of thing.
Mentality.
Like it's just yeah, I can kind of understand the annoyance with that one. And honestly, I just kind of find it funny. Again, this was something that again, this there's so many parallels between this and that fucking women ruin video game video that I took a look at. But like I still remember this was literally brought up, but like the entire thing with like the Stellar Blade controversy was that it was entirely one-sided. It was just the anti-woke crowd basically thinking that the game was whipping a whole bunch of like a bunch of the woke crowd into like a triggered frenzy when in reality they just didn't give a shit.
I mean, I guess, but also like when the people started to scream censorship, they're like, "Oh, this game hasn't been censored," and they tried to rewrite history, and like, "Oh, people weren't getting mad about this." Like, and that's the one big thing that I can say here is the problem with games journalists, right? Is that they cannot ever take constructive criticism. And that brings me back
Yeah,
into
that's
this
a
into the allegory of the cave where we're the people who knows how on the ground floor things actually work in terms of at least the video games, or at least we have or at least we have a better understanding of consumer and stuff like that because we actually consume the products and stuff there because we can see it, but they only see the vague shadows of what they think the games industry is, and that's how it feels a lot of the times. And you can kind of point to several different examples for that. So,
yeah. Anyways, let's see here. Team Elden Ring got mad last week when a couple of reviews said it was too difficult. Accusations flew across the Twitter sphere. The critics behind said reviews were told in no certain uncertain terms to get good and suffered far worse abuse, as misogynistic as it was vitriolic. Cuphead has been brought up again. Okay, I might as well just kind of bring
how?
it up here, but who the fuck was bringing up Cuphead? Second of all, where was the like maybe I can kind of understand it from like some of the really dumb motherfuckers that decide to go after Alyssa Mercant purely because she's just a woman that's like a games journalist and whatnot. People like me, we go after Alyssa Mercant because she's just fucking stupid.
Yeah. Look
But
at the
like
note, by the way. Read that.
there's another issue here to do with reading comprehension and media literacy, but I won't get into that one today. I mean, I can kind of somewhat understand that, but in this
Yeah.
case, I don't think it has to do with media literacy. I think it just has to come with you just not fucking understanding
There is,
anything.
I
Fast forward a week, and players are leveling the very same accusations at the From Software DLC. Countless mods have added easy modes to the game, one called Journalist Mode.
nice.
I'm sorry, I fucking love that. Despite the fact that journos beat the game without needing it, players feel bosses are unfair and believe that systems are too obtruse, yet they refuse to engage with some of the game's core mechanics due to believing that they are a cheat's way out. I wonder if any of them apologize to their viewers who pointed out these very issues. Again, I can understand like the hypocrisy behind like those kinds of people because I guess in this case, as Assman Bronze comes to mind here, which funnily enough, I recently found out that he apparently has effectively uploaded a video basically shitting on like customer service workers for requiring tips in order for them to even be able to live.
Yeah. On tipping. The whole tipping culture comes from the Great Depression, as we've kind of gone over, and I'll probably not include this in the video, but if I do, the essence of tipping is essentially I don't like tipping as a concept. Tipping as a concept sucks a lot. However, you still do it because you don't want to be a dick to people, right? I might not like the system. I might be very critical of pay the people more so I don't have to pay their bills or pay them specifically. But since that system still exists, I can't I can't find it in my heart to say like, oh, I won't just tip. Like, no, stopping tipping won't be the problem. Like, it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah,
Stopping
it
tipping does
won't
not solve
really
the
solve the
problem. You
problem.
can be
What
critical of it.
solves the problem, like, yeah, you can be critical of it, and the thing is that even I myself want the tipping culture to end. But the thing is that with Assman Bronze and his entire video, he wants tipping culture to end purely because he just don't want to actually provide people a living wage.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, I want tipping culture to end because I want companies to actually pay their fucking workers properly.
exactly. Exactly. 100%. I agree.
Struggling with like
We're
certain
going
things and
on too
whatnot.
long
Like,
about this. Let's move
yeah,
on.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
Let's
just Elden
move on
Ring.
here.
It's not just an Elden Ring problem. When Kelly Plague reviewed Cyberpunk 2077 for GameSpot, she was hounded by thousands of players pointing out the game's negatives. She didn't like the edgy aesthetics that played no meaningful part in the gameplay. She was labeled as a prude. She pointed out offensive depictions of minorities. So she was called an SJW. She called out the technical issues obvious even on PC. So she suffered a barrage of hatred. Plague was receiving
That lot.
let me finish here. End of a whirlwind abuse from gamers excited for CD Projekt Red's new titles. 8 years in the making, their excitement as well as the marketing campaign blinded them from seeing fair criticism as exactly that, fair. I don't know her, but I imagine play she was accepted to play. She was excited to play the game too. Games journalists and critics like games, and yet her 7 out of 10 reviews sparked days of collective outrage. Okay, let me be clear here. Out of the 3 things listed, only one is actual good critique.
Only one,
Only
yeah,
one
only
is.
one of them is an actually good critique, and that is the technical issues, which
Yes.
the moment that the game came out,
Everyone
everybody fucking
realized.
noticed.
Yeah. Again, the
Again,
technical issues are a
thankfully,
big
at
issue.
least CD Projekt Red are kind of going through like a Hello Games redemption arc right now, where they're
Mhm.
actually working on the game and it's
Yeah,
actually good now. But like,
that's kind of been their whole process, because if you remember, I think The Witcher 3 also had a lot of problems at the beginning, and then they worked on it, became
yeah,
like the best game ever, and they sold it for years and years and years. So I think that they're doing the same thing here.
yeah,
But so again, the edgy aesthetics played no meaningful part in the gameplay. They played a meaningful part in the fucking story and lore and thing of the actual game world. So that seems very important, right? Like to
exactly.
create an aesthetic of cyberpunk, not utopia, but the opposite of that, right? Of a
The
cyberpunk world,
dystopia.
yeah, the dystopia of where you are physically under the boot of shit, right? And creating a dank,
Yeah,
dirty environment.
literally, if I remember correctly, like the entire thing of like Cyberpunk 2077 and whatnot is that like it's basically just like a dystopia where there's like cybernetic enhancements and whatnot, but like it's
Everything is run
all
by
under like the
corporations.
chew of like corporate control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, the edgy aesthetics do play a meaningful role in the story of it as well, which is the whole big point of that. It's the same thing with like how Elden Ring, right? It's hard difficulty and people complaining about it being hard. That's the point in the fucking
Yeah,
story. That is gameplay literally affecting the story of a game, right? Am I taking
yeah,
crazy
the
pills here?
entire point like the entire point of like not just with Elden Ring but with like Souls games in general is that like it's meant to be a challenge that you're kind of meant to kind of gradually figure out how to deal with, so that way you can eventually overcome it. It's kind of like a case of like the indomitable human spirit, if you will, where
Mhm.
you eventually figure out what you're supposed to do and you eventually overcome it, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah, and then there's the second point, which is pointing out the offensive
Oh, so it's
depictions
basically
of.
Neuralink. I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong,
You're not
Neil.
wrong. You're not wrong. But so pointed out the offensive depictions of minorities and being called an SJW. Look, I, having played the game, haven't seen that, right? I didn't see it in that throughout the entire game. I did not see any sort of offensive depictions. You can get offended by anything, but I didn't see any of that offensive content ever. I didn't see anyone in like that sort of like very stereotypical stuff or any sort of
Yeah.
like character that was just like a one-off that like, oh, that person was this color and that's fine. Like they didn't fucking care at the end of the day, you know?
I think judging by like how this is formatted, it just kind of seems to be almost like a case similar to the Alyssa Mercant Elden Ring DLC
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Except the entire
Where
article
it
is
was like
that.
whereas like really terrible and like pointing out nothing burger points and whatnot, and then like when
Right.
the actual major problem comes out, barely anyone is listening because you've already basically bored them with like something else that didn't even fucking matter, so why should they care about that? Like it's just kind of like one of those cases where you basically fucked up the entire article at that point. Like
Yeah.
you should have just started off with the actual main fucking point.
Yeah.
However, when the game released, fans saw the truth for themselves. Just days after Plague's review was published, a post appeared on the Cyberpunk subreddit titled, "Everyone talks shit about her, but I'm starting to agree with Kelly Plague." On the whole, the review was more positive than the sentiment on the subreddit. The fan reaction was so intense that a new subreddit, r/low sodium cyberpunk, was set up by the minority of fans wanting to escape the swaths turning on the game for the exact reasons Plague pointed out. I feel like most
Mm-hmm.
people were probably mainly pointing out the massive problems when it came to the technical problems and whatnot, and not any
Yeah.
of the other issues.
Yeah.
But whatever, I guess
Okay,
completely omit that
we're like
point.
30 minutes recording. Let's continue. We break down every paragraph. We're gonna be here forever. What gives? At what point do you start trusting game critics and those who review your games as much as you think we're different to you? That we have different agendas and want to tear down the things you love, we're not. We love video games. We wouldn't do this job otherwise, but we have to be honest about our opinions. So find someone with similar opinions to you. While Eurogame reviewer has found the DLC so difficult it spoiled their experience. Our review released from Software's seemingly insurmountable challenge. I myself play and review a lot of RPGs and text-heavy games because I'm a book nerd at heart. If you too like these sorts of games and welcome valid criticism of the genre, keep tabs on my Open Critic page. Very
All
lovely
right, I come
self-promote
right.
there,
Yeah, I
first of
come
all.
right back during the fucking shameless self promotion right
Yeah,
here in
yeah,
the middle of this
yeah.
fucking article.
So the that whole I need to read that again. But that whole part of that was basically him saying, "So what gives? Why are people not trusting game critics anymore? We don't. We don't. As much as you think that we're different, we're not. Blah blah blah. Here's the thing, right? The problem with finding someone with similar opinions is that ends up creating like an echo chamber in some cases. So you have to be very careful with
Yeah,
that. The one biggest thing here is that valid criticism is the sentence that I want to point out. A lot of video game reviewers do not put valid criticism into their stuff. Again, to go
yeah,
back to the
they
earlier Plague
really,
review, 2 out of the
yeah.
3 points that we put into there were
So out
not
of 3 points,
necessarily valid. Because again,
yeah,
the
they just
offensiveness
didn't
and
need to
the
be there.
yeah, the offensiveness and the what was the other one?
The
Um,
offensiveness, and I think it was like fuck, I
yeah,
actually now have to check. It was
being offended
uh
and the
and
edgy
the
acid.
edgy
Yeah, the
aesthetics
both the edgy aesthetics and the offensiveness of it
and the
were
offensive
not
shins,
valid,
which
right?
yeah, they
Because
weren't valid
the
criticisms.
aesthetic is the graphics and the stuff to create the world and the lore of the game. That's what that's meant to do, and that brought it across in a very meaningful way that that person just happened to miss. The same thing with the offensiveness. That's more of a very like biased opinion in some cases because you can get offended by fucking anything. People have gotten
Yeah.
offended by I think like even chocolate chip cookies and pizza. Like that is not like people get offended by bagels. Are you kidding me? They're like I will always bring this story up. but there was a New York bagel place that tried to open up in Montreal. The business failed because the Montreal people didn't like their bagels and got kind of offended that those bagels
Bruh.
existed in there. Like, not offended like that they didn't do it. They just got offended enough to not go there. You know what I mean? It's
Jesus.
to bring up those 2 points, that's not valid. The only one would be the technical issues, and those would be something worth talking about. Saying, hey, look, this game has a lot of technical issues, buyer beware, is a super valid criticism. But say, hey, this game is offensive to me, is not a valid criticism.
Yeah.
Right? Unless it
When
says,
it
like,
comes
unless you
to
bring it into a more neutral standpoint, saying, like, oh, this game has depictions of X, Y, and Z, which might offend some people. Right?
yeah, that would probably be at least like a semi better way of actually. It still wouldn't exactly be the most valid of criticisms, but it would be better than just stating I didn't like it, which just
Yes.
ends up becoming more of a subjective thing, and is just kind of like, okay, dude, who the fuck cares?
Yeah. All right. All right.
And when it comes, and I
Last
guess
couple
going to the
paragraphs.
Elden Ring example of like, the reviewers complaining that it was too hard and whatnot, like again, that's not really valid critique because again, that is the point of
Well,
FromSoft
and not
games.
even that that's the point. It's also hard for them in the sense of they don't understand that it's a Souls game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Like they
difficulty,
complain about it, and yeah,
yeah, difficulty is different depending on who you ask, because it brings me back to what I was talking about earlier, where there are three pillars in terms of gameplay, right? There is
yeah,
mechanical understanding, movement, and speed. All three of these are required for games. I've gone into this a number of times. But mechanical understanding, speed, and movement don't just apply to the game itself, they also apply to the person's skill level. So, specific games, such as Osu, um, to use a random example, are very low on mechanical understanding, but high in both movement and speed. Like, speed is probably one of the higher
yeah.
things. Um, and both of those are required in spades when you're doing things like Osu or Guitar Hero. However, for say a game like Call of Duty or The Finals or any survival game, those games require a high level of mechanical understanding, where you have to understand the mechanics of the game and how they operate in order to
Yeah.
create better stuff. You might not be the best at speed, or you might not even be the best at movement at some times, but it requires both of it. Elden Ring is a perfect example. High level of mechanical understanding, a medium level of movement, and a pretty decent level of speed. But speed is not necessarily required, but it is definitely a high level of mechanical understanding that is required for
Definitely
that
got
game.
I mean a lot of speed from Mesmer. That's all I gotta say.
Absolutely. Anyway.
Mesmer moves at like fucking Mach 12. He's like Sisyphus Prime for some reason.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Anyways, this is how to navigate the media landscape. Find someone your tastes align with, or whose criticism you enjoy reading. Find your Roger Ebert.
Roger Ebert.
I don't know who, I don't know who the fuck that is.
1984, I believe.
Ah,
He's the
don't
author.
just look at the don't just look at the biggest reviews on the biggest sites because you lack important context about the person behind the webpage. You can expect their review to be balanced and fair, but will also be entirely subjective. Reviews are opinions, after all, so you need to dig a little deeper to understand
Nope.
whether this is
Hold
a
on.
perspective that is.
I stand
Yeah,
wildly corrected. Roger Ebert
yeah.
is a movie reviewer.
Okay. Find a perspective that's similar to yours. If your favorite reviewer writes for independent zine, go for it. That might be more valuable to you than IGN or the Gamer write up. Listen. I just have to point out here. Okay, I guess while some things about like reviews can in fact be subjective, I feel like there should be some actual objective things that should
Yeah.
actually be within a review. Like, are there
So
performance problems?
so here's the
Yes or
thing.
no?
I
Are there like certain like if there are like fundamental problems with the game that are like actual genuine problems, not just like wah wah, I can't handle it, then like
but
obviously that should be part of a review. But like
so
I feel like we're kind of getting this disconnect here of like this person seems to be thinking that for some reason, just because oh, it's just my opinion, therefore it just comes across as like it's just these people's opinion, so why are people going up
right.
against
No, no,
them
no.
when you
So
but when you actually begin to realize like what the opinion is, then it's just kind of like, dude, you just don't fucking get it again.
yeah.
It's
So here's the thing with this, right? Um I'll just read the last paragraph and I'll get into my point. But no games journalist is out to get you. The vast majority try to be fair in their criticism and unbiased. When it comes to inconsequential arguments like the console performances, nobody what? Nobody's going to give Astrobot a 2 because they love Xbox. Nobody is trying to destroy game developers' lives. We're honest, we're opinionated, we're human, just like you. And look, that's not true. It doesn't feel true. That's the problem, that this article comes across as you being very self-congratulatory. Now,
Yeah,
to say that
it
no
kind of
game
seems like
journalist is
one
out to
big
get you,
self-jack-off session.
to say that no game journalist is out to get you, didn't Alyssa Mercante literally say, "Hey, come out and fight me,
Yeah, yeah,
IRL"?
didn't
Like
yeah, Alyssa
what?
Marcant literally pulled like, a card out of
Yeah,
like the
the I
insecure
fight.
man-child's
Yeah,
playbook of like,
I
please
will fight
fight
you.
me over it.
Yeah, the I will fight you IRL thing. Like she pulled
And
that
again,
card.
I have to bring this up. As a wise Florida man once said, and that wise Florida man is Charlie, he quite literally brought this up in a video, but like he basically stated, so what if you could beat me in a fight? It doesn't exactly change the actual points at
Yeah.
hand.
Also, I find so
Like, does it change the fact that like your review was stupid? No.
yeah,
Just because you won a fight doesn't fucking mean that the fucking
yeah.
doesn't mean
I will
that anybody's pretty valid.
yeah. I
It
will
just
also
makes you look
say
more insecure.
I'll also say so. Roger Ebert was a very famous film critic. He had a show called Ebert, which was him and one other person, where they would go out and review they would review movies. And they're like, oh, how would they do that before the thing of YouTube? They would do it on like actual television. Like they had an actual TV show where they went out, they saw movies that week, and they would review it. And that show went on. Was like in the 80s, I believe, 80s, early 90s, and essentially, he had very valid critiques of it in terms of the movie, talking about the story, talking about the actors, talking about that. And all of that is very subjective, and absolutely. But he never meant it to be objective, is the thing. Because he was like, oh, this movie, there was very clearly videos and movies that did super well despite the fact that they got a negative Roger Ebert review. However, it's becoming more clear, at least in terms of games journalists, that they do have fair criticisms, but those fair criticisms are few and far between. They do have unbiased and inconsequential arguments, but that's not true as well. Because there are games, there are video, and there are entire sites dedicated to things like the PlayStation or the Xbox. There's like DualShockers, which is a PlayStation-centric fucking review site. There is
Yeah.
Xbox-centric or something along those lines. I forget specifically what they're branded with. But like there's like Xbox-centric ones that I can't think of off the top of my head. But there is bias there. Like that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's been the problem the entire time, is these game journalists just have biases that they put into their reviews. And Alyssa Mercante is not the only one with this. Because, again, to go back to things like the Sweet Baby Inc. debacle, where Sweet Baby Inc. got defended to the moon and back because of all of the gaming journalists that were out there not reporting how fucking stupid it is. They are deciding to ruin art, and they are threatening and bribing their fucking customers, which is the businesses and the devs, that no one's reporting on it. And the biggest thing to come out that was actually kind of positive in the industry has been deemed as a negative, because Xbox literally just fired all of their DEI guys. Like, the entire wing of DEI got completely axed. And everyone's like, oh, this is terrible. It's like, it sucks that people lost their jobs, but that's good. Because I've said it once, and I've said it 1,000 times. If you need a consultant or someone else onto your art to make your art more appealing, you have failed as an artist. Banksy doesn't need that. Fucking most of the people throughout art history do not need that. Like, there was an entire movement of things like Bauhaus and things like the pop culture or the pop art movement, or the minimalism movement, where they rejected the norms of the previous generation of art. Sorry, I got very
Yeah.
passionate right there. But yes, that's my whole
I
thing.
can understand. But yeah, to me, this entire article just comes across as just like this guy just seems to almost revel in the fact that he just doesn't actually understand, nor does he seem to want to understand the actual problems when it comes to why people are mad at games journalists. Like it almost seems like this man is like, almost glad about the fact that there are just some games journalists that hide genuine problems underneath a layer of bullshit points that nobody actually gives a shit about that ends up ruining the entire review. Like it just comes across as just like you don't understand, and you're happy that you don't understand, and you're happy that you just don't want to fucking understand or want to hear anybody out, and you're patting yourself on the back for it, and I just don't understand why.
Again, it
Like,
goes back to the
this is the kind of like living in ignorance that
yeah.
I just find fucking annoying.
Again, like I said before, it's the cave argument. This person is very deep in the cave to where when anyone gives him any criticism about, like, you're just watching the shadows of what other people want you to believe is the existence of the real world, why don't you come with me and I can actually show you what the real world means? Like, they don't want to because
This
they've just
guy,
known
yeah,
it
this
as the
guy
cave
would
the entire
probably like
time.
try and bite at my fucking throat over it. Like
Exactly.
that's just how this comes across as. And it's just
Exactly.
kind of like it's just kind of like it's disappointing.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can describe it,
Anyway,
is
I
that to me this
think
is
that that's the end of the
disappointing.
article. And we've been recording for like nearly
Where
50
it ends.
minutes. Recording for 50
Secretly a survival horror. You know what? You know what? I can understand that with the
Anyway,
Abyssal Woods.
But, so, I think that'll about do it for this episode of I Rant to a Microphone for the reasons of passion about video games. If you like what it is that I do, want to support me in any way, shape, or form, links down to everything in the description below. I will also link Mr. Sanity over here as well. Do you have anything to say to the people?
I
Excellent.
guess just check out. Fucking great.
No, continue.
I was about to say, I guess just, check out what I usually do. I kind of similar so far on my channel, except with like some more broader subject than just like mainly video games. But I do cover video game related stuff here and there. So if you're interested in just that, then I have that. But if you're interested in a wider array of topics, like recently I just released a video about a content farm shorts creator that's going around and abusing the broken copyright tool on YouTube. If that interests you, go ahead and check me out, I guess.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is GamePang21, and a peace.
Hey man, can I get a favor?